You ever stare at a blank screen and just wonder, how does it magically turn into a website? Well, it's not magic at all. It's actually a conversation between two core languages that build literally everything you see online. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain and look at the absolute fundamental building blocks of the web, HTML and CSS. So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big picture, how the web actually works. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of HTML, its key pieces, and finally, how to make it all look good and arrange it perfectly with CSS and something called Flexbox. All right, so before we can even think about writing a single line of code, we got to understand the world it lives in. How does a web page get from some random computer out there through the internet and onto your screen? Think of it like a really quick four-step conversation. First, your browser sends out a request. It's basically asking, hey, can I see this page? A web server somewhere out there gets that request and finds the right file. Then it sends a response back to your browser, which is just that file. Finally, your browser reads all the code in that file and displays the web page for you. This whole back and forth follows a set of rules called HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So how does your browser know exactly where to send that request? Well, it uses a specific address, kind of like a mailing address for a house. On the web, we call this a URL, which stands for Uniform Resource Locator. Let's actually break one of these down. First, you've got the protocol, like HTTPS. This just tells the browser how to communicate, in this case, securely. Next up is the domain name. That's the address of the server itself. And finally, you have the file path, which is like a map through a folder system, pointing to the exact document you're asking for. Okay, so let's talk about that file the server sends back. That's our HTML file. And the best way to think about it is like the structural blueprint for a house. It defines all the rooms, the walls, and where everything should go. But it doesn't say a thing about what color the walls are. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Hypertext is that amazing concept that lets us link pages together. It's literally what makes the web a web. But the really important word here is markup. See, unlike a programming language that tells a computer to do something, a markup language simply describes the content. It tells the browser, hey, this chunk of text, that's a heading, or this part right here is a paragraph. And it does this using tags, which are just keywords wrapped in these angle brackets. You'll have an opening tag, like P for a paragraph, and then a closing tag that looks the same but has a forward slash. Everything in between, the tags and the content itself, we call that whole thing an element. Now, a really key concept in HTML is that elements behave in different ways. They mostly fall into two camps. You've got block elements, which are kind of greedy. They always start on a brand new line and stretch to take up all the horizontal space they can. Think of a paragraph. Then you have inline elements. These are more polite. They just fit right into the flow of text and only take up as much space as they absolutely need. Okay, so we know what elements are. Now let's look at the essential Lego bricks, the pieces you're going to use over and over and over again to build out the structure of your page. These are your bread and butter. You've got headings from H1, which is the most important, all the way down to H6. You've got your paragraph tag, P, for any block of text. The div tag is a super useful generic container. It's like a plain cardboard box you can put other stuff inside to keep it organized. And of course, the anchor tag, A, for links, and the image tag, image. Let's zoom in on that link tag for a second. To actually make it work, it needs a little extra information. We give it that info with something called an attribute. In this case, the attribute's name is href, which stands for Hypertext Reference, and its value is the URL we want to link to. See how that attribute just sits right inside the opening tag? The image tag is pretty similar. It uses a source attribute for the image source and an alt attribute for a text description, which is super important for accessibility. But notice something different here? There's no closing image tag. That's because an image is what we call an empty element. It doesn't wrap around any content, so it just closes itself. So we've built the house with HTML. We've got the rooms and the walls. But right now, it's just a bunch of gray concrete. To add paint, put in furniture, and really give it some style, we need our second language, CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Now, the most fundamental concept for understanding how CSS lays things out, and honestly the one thing that trips up almost everyone at first, is the box model. Here's the secret. Your browser sees every single HTML element, whether it's a paragraph, an image, or a div, as being inside its own invisible rectangular box. And this box has 4 layers. This diagram here breaks it down perfectly. Right at the very center, you've got your content, your text or your image. Working your way out from there, you have 3 layers of space you can control. First is the padding, which is inside the box. Then you have the border itself, and finally, the margin, which is the empty space outside the box. So here is the crucial takeaway. If you want to add some breathing room inside an element's box between the content and its border, you use padding. If you want to create space outside the box to push other elements away from it, you use margin. It's kind of like the difference between the insulation inside a wall versus the empty space between 2 separate houses. Okay, we can now style our individual boxes, which is great, but how do we arrange them on the page? Well, one of the most powerful and modern tools for this in CSS is called Flexbox. Flexbox is a layout model designed to make it incredibly easy to align things and distribute space inside a container. You basically just tell a container element, hey, you're a flex container now, and boom, you get a whole new set of simple, powerful properties to control everything inside it. Let's look at a really common property: justify content. This controls how things are aligned horizontally. The default value is flex start, which, as you can see, just bunches all the items up at the beginning of the container. But watch what happens if we change that one value to center. Just like that, Flexbox automatically does the math and perfectly centers that group of items inside the container. No more headaches. And check this one out. Here's another powerful option: space between. This takes all that extra empty space and distributes it evenly between the items, pushing the first and last ones right to the edges. This is absolutely perfect for things like a navigation menu. As you get started on your own projects, here's a crucial tip. Computers are extremely literal. A single typo or a forgotten bracket can break your whole page. So a great habit to get into is using the official W3C validator. You just paste your code in, and it'll point out any syntax mistakes you might have made. And there you have it. From that very first request your browser sends out, to getting the HTML blueprint, to styling and arranging every single element with CSS, you now have the fundamental knowledge of how every web page is put together. So the only question left is, what kind of house are you going to build?